What's good? It's AJ and I'm back with another video. Today I wanted to discuss the importance of low-end mixing. So today I got this demo. It's called At the Gate because I made this at the gate at an airport. So here it is. Fire demo. Can't wait to finish it. But yeah, so I wanted to discuss the importance of the low end. I'm referring to mixing clarity, depth, separation, and the main thing is translation from a mixing setup like what I'm working with right now. I have two Yamaha HS7s and I have a PreSonus 8-inch sub on the floor. Going into an SSL 12, so my MacBook M2 Pro. Perfect. So the main goal when it comes to mixing low end is translation to other setups. So other setups meaning cars, phone speakers, headphones, club speakers. These are places where low end mixing is probably the most important element of a mix. So with this mix in specific, I have many types of things going on, elements in the mix that are in the low end, and I needed to do a lot of different separation and mixing tricks to kind of get them to all fit in the same space. Some of those mixing tricks include mono and stereo. It includes careful appliance of reverb at different spots, making sure the phase is right. You could always pan anything in a mix, but the low end is not really something you want to pan because at least back in the day on vinyl, if low end was not mono, if it was in stereo, if it was panned, the needle would pop off the vinyl. So that was back then though. And of course, times have completely changed. Even though vinyl is still sold nowadays, the main form of consumption of music is all digital waveforms. So that's not really much of a concern now. And remember, with music, there's no rules. You could do whatever you want. With this mix, I'll show you. I'm going to solo the drums and the sub. So with the sub, you hear it really heavy and up in your face, while the kick is deep, punchy, but it's short. Because I have such a big and heavy sub, I don't want the kick and the sub clashing. I need the kick to have its own spot and the sub to have its own spot. So for me, I put all the drums spaced out. I have the panning of the hats on the right, the left. I have the snare pan to the right slightly. I have the main claps smothered in reverb and saturation, and I put a Haas effect as well. As you can see here, I have this Haas effect. I have a little Valhalla room going before the Haas effect. And if I mute these effects, I also have an EQ cutting out the low end, which is extremely important when it comes to mixing every other element with the sub. You don't want any other element to have frequencies that clash with the sub because it'll sound muddy, it'll sound like an overpopulated mix. So if I take these these effects, and I mute them, you'll get something like this. I'll just play the clap. Super basic drum machine, throwback kind of clap. And if I turn them on, huge difference in the stereo field and the spatial field, adding the reverb. It gives it depth and a real sense of space like I discussed in my last video. So again, I'm going to solo just the drums now. So see, you have the kick right up front. You got the tambourine with the reverb as well. Same concept. You hear that? See if I turn off the reverb here. Same thing. I have the Haas effect. I'm splitting it left and right channels. Reverb as well. Giving it a whole different sense of space. I have these drums right here. You hear the hat is panned slightly to the left. The snare is kind of in the center. So the drums are kind of spread out in the stereo field. That leaves room for the kick to be front and center and the sub to take over the entire low end frequency. So the trick with this mix is, in this demo, I have different types of low end going on. So along with these drums that I have, fire drums, I have another bass, kind of like a log drum. I named it house bass, whatever you want to call it. I'll turn off the effect here. Actually, no, let me play it before that. Now you hear the sub and that kind of house bass playing with each other. They're kind of communicating, bouncing off each other. You hear the house bass more in the background, giving it a sense of depth, while the sub is right in front of your face. So in order to make sure they didn't clash, obviously I added reverb, but I put Valhalla Room on it, making sure that the sub frequency, as you can see here in this EQ8 right here, I cut out the deep sub part. I still left a little bit of the bass so you could hear a little bit of that heaviness, the weight. But I didn't want the low end to be a part of the house bass in the background, because if it was, it would clash with the sub that's up front. So that gives it a sense of space. I'll just solo the sub in that house bass so you could hear it. I'll include the kick. Now that I have the kick playing with the sub and that house bass, you can hear the difference in frequency. So the sub holds the most weight. The kick, I had to add crunch to it and a weird kind of EQ over here, because when it comes to the kick, I did not want the kick to be in the way of either of those bass elements, those low end elements. So I added a compressor. This LA2A, one of my favorite compressors. This is free, by the way. It was, at least, when I got it. Just a little bit. Honestly think it's barely working. I don't think yeah, you see? Just a drop. But yeah, I cut out this kind of EQ curve, a little bit of the low mids here. I added an SSL EQ afterwards. I brought out the high mids, the low mids. I took away some of the super low end. I didn't touch the high end. And I turned the analog on. Very slight effect. And then I added Hot Fuzz, which is a stock Ableton plugin that adds a slight amount of crunch. If I play just a kick right here, I'll undo that and this transient shaper. This is without. This is with. Very slight, but it's still there. Crunch. It makes the kick pop in a different frequency range on the spectrum compared to the sub and the house bass. And then again, I didn't want the kick to be too overpowering because of the weight of the sub, so I added a transient shaper. I just cut the tail off a drop, literally 25%. Cut off the sustain, so it doesn't drag on. Transient shaper, all it does is just shorten the sound. So instead of being like boom, 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 now it's like boom, 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 boom. So yeah, all of that is doing its job. Now remember, at least when I mix, every single thing I do has a purpose. Nothing is there for no reason, no matter how subtle. I'm a very, very detail-oriented person. This is why I got into making music in the first place, because I'm a huge fan of attention to detail, and I'm an extremely observant listener and human being in general. I'm a huge fan of life, and I'm very perceptive to every aspect of life, every single aspect. So I try to incorporate that in all of my work, whether that be the music I make, the artwork for the covers of the beats that I drop, in sketches that I have, in the music videos that I have. If you guys saw my last video, Bubbles, in everything I do, in the clothes I wear, to how I carry myself, to how I exercise, all that, extremely detail oriented. And that's just me. If you're not detail oriented, there's producers like, say, Chase the Money. Chase the Money, I love his stuff, but his stuff is extremely simple in comparison to what I like. Not to what I like, to what I make. Because that's just me. It's an extension of the artists themselves, really. So yeah, with that being said, I have all those elements separated in the mix. So now we have the kick, we have the sub, we have that house bass all going. I'm going to solo all of them right now, have them still playing. So now we're occupying basically the lower half of the entire frequency spectrum in the mix so far. Now, if I include the drums, now we're kind of occupying a mix. We got the drums, we got the sub, and the house bass. As you can hear, everything has its own space. I highly recommend listening to this video in a car or through headphones, whatever you have that's high quality where you can hear the low end. Because really, without headphones, watching this video is, I guess it's still helpful based on what I'm saying, but you're not going to hear what I'm trying to explain. So now that I have those elements in the mix, I have the main lead of this beat is occupying a heavy chunk of the low end mids. So not really low end, but low end mids. So I'll play it with the lead. So I'm going to solo that actually, and I'm going to turn off any effect I had. So I have EQ8 and I have True Verb on this, which is another form of reverb. I'll open it here so you can see. This is True Verb by Waves. Sick plugin, highly recommend. So here is without. Super boring sound from Tyrell and 6 by Yuhi. Super boring. You can see here, it's called 2013 by Urs Heckman. So yeah, I put the True Verb on with these settings. Mind you, the side chain is on with the kick. So that's why you're hearing the ducking of the sound. Like if I turn off the side chain, it'd be like this. But if I turn it on, you hear it ducking for the kick, but the kick is not playing because I'm just soloing the lead. So yeah, I'm just going to keep that soloed. I have the True Verb on it. Opened it up massively, but with that comes a massive increase in the sub. So if I let that play with the rest of it, it's going to become extremely muddy, which is something I do not want. I want clarity and depth and separation in my mixes, and the most important is the translation into other sound systems like the club, like the car, like headphones, whatever the case may be, because I know that whoever's listening to my stuff is not going to be listening on a perfect studio setup like I have or that major studios have. Nobody's listening, the main listeners at least. That being said, I make music for myself and how I like it. I'm a creative and I do it for me. But you have to keep in mind, if you want other people to appreciate your art the same way you do, you have to keep in mind how they will be consuming your product. If you want them to appreciate it, at least to a certain degree, because nobody's going to appreciate it as much as you do. If it doesn't give you goosebumps, it's not going to give anybody else goosebumps. So you have to love it first. So after the True Verb, since it still had a massive increase in sub with that reverb bouncing around the walls of the room, as you can hear, I cut out the subs right here. I'll pull this up. As you can see, cut out this whole part, if you can see behind my head. So yeah, I have that whole thing cut out. So now everything is in the mix, sitting nice, sitting clean. So I'll solo the sub, house bass, the lead, and the kick. As you can hear, if you have good headphones or you're in a good car sound system, Or even if not, if you're listening on a phone too, you should be able to hear everything perfectly in its own section of the frequency spectrum. Now, that's the low end. So I'm going to reintroduce the drums with it. Now, I have more elements to the mix. So another element I have is a Wurlitzer, the electric piano. I have this from Keyscape. I have a bunch of effects on this. This you can't really see. I have a chorus. It's behind my head. I have a Haas effect again, delaying the left and right channels. So it hits the right channel before the left, giving it a stereo effect. Then I have this EQ8, cutting out the subs, of course, a little more than the rest because I didn't need any low end for this. I wanted it to occupy a high end. And then a little dip in the mids. I use EQ8 as a mid side EQ. If you go into here, you go mode and it'll default on stereo. So I choose MS, which stands for mid side, and I make sure to be in the M mode and then duck out the mono channel of the low mids here. So including the whirly with the rest of the low end and the drums, it'll sound like this. Now you can see I'm finding empty space in the mix to plug in the rest of my elements. Mind you, I made this in Newark Airport and I brought it with me to Florida, and I was just listening through MacBook speakers. So then when I brought it back from Florida to my studio setup here in New York, it sounded crazy, like muddy. The beat was fire, obviously, but nothing was sitting right. So I spent a little time, perfecting the mix as best I could, and this is what I came with. Now, by no means is this perfect, but I think I did a decent job. So now you have the whirly. I'm going to introduce this sound. It's like a riser kind of starter effect. I'm going to solo it. Again, I ducked out the mono channel of the mids here just to give it more space because I didn't want it to be in the center, which is where the sub is. Keep it in the stereo channel. And I added some Valhalla Vintage Verb just to make it like spread with that reverb effect. So let me bring back the drums again. Here, drums, starter, got the house bass, sub, whirly. So that sounds amazing. Last thing I added in this part of the demo was the keys. The last main thing, I should say. So I have this Una Corda felt piano from Contact. Fire piano. It sounds super realistic. And then I added this EQ again. EQ8 is amazing because it uses basically no CPU. Again, I'm using it in mid-side mode. Again, right over here you could see. But this time I'm in the side mode, boosting the stereo channel, so the side channel. And yeah, I cut out the subs, of course. I'll bring this up again. See, it has no sub here, cutting it out. So that's basically the main skeleton of my mix. The last thing I didn't play in this demo yet, I have this kind of flutter flute sound. So I'll solo these too. So I have two channels. One is panned 30 to the left, and then one is panned 30 to the right. Just to give it kind of like a cool effect, switching from channel to channel. Again, it's a very high-end element. This has nothing to do with the low end, but I have it completely separate in its own space. And it's panned. I wanted it to be panned because I have a lot going on with the drums. And I didn't want it to clash in the center. I didn't want it to clash too much, in the stereo effect. So I put it right in a good balance of 30 on one side, 30 on the other. So yeah, this beat, I'm a huge fan of this beat. I'm actually very proud of it. This is some of my favorite work that I've done, and it's only literally a demo. I made this at an airport. I actually started this beat at work on my computer. I had a couple minutes of downtime. I started just a drum pattern, just this. And then with the kick. I also forgot to mention I do have a tape hiss on the drums. I like to keep that always because it gives it a sense of realism. Nice flavor. Again, I have a lot of processing on the drums, but that's for another video. This video is about low end and its importance when it comes to sound system translation, when it comes to depth, when it comes to clarity, when it comes to separation. Keep these things in mind when you mix. And just a small tip of advice is that when you are someone like me who likes to be the producer, the artist, the mixing engineer, and the mastering engineer, I'm infatuated with all of what there is to do with sound. I love sound. And I don't like anybody touching my stuff because I don't trust people to tweak the way I have it in my head. What I envision, I only trust myself to bring to life. I don't trust other people because they don't have my brain. That's just the fact of life. So that's why I got into making music. And this is what I enjoy doing. I love it. And I highly recommend that when you want to be all of these things, be conscious and be aware of what role you're playing in the moment. So when I start making a beat, I have my producer hat on. This tip of advice, by the way, I got from a massively successful mixing engineer, Manny American. Fire mixing engineer. He mixed some of the best records, going from Whitney Houston to Travis Scott. He probably mixed to Bruno Mars as well. He probably mixed some of your favorite records you don't even know. So he said this too. Be conscious of what hat you're wearing. So when I start a beat, I'm wearing the producer hat. Then sometimes while I'm making the beat, I have to switch to the mixing engineer. Then let's say I'm doing the arrangement, that's back to the producer. And then while I'm mapping out the arrangement, I have to switch to the mastering engineer just to get a taste of what it would sound like when it's done. But you cannot have all the hats on at the same time. This is a huge problem that I used to have. And just to save anybody watching any trouble, do not try and have all the hats on at the same time. If you're doing something, focus on being the producer. Focus on being the mixing engineer. Focus on being the mastering engineer. If you're an artist as well, focus on being the artist. Do not do them at the same time. Take 30 minutes to do one thing, 30 to another, 30 to another. Or one day you do this, one day you work on it this way, one day you're mastering, one day you're mixing. Whatever the case may be. One thing at a time. Keep that in mind. If you do one thing at a time, you're able to put your full effort as a producer into making the beat. Full effort as a mixing engineer to get clarity, to get depth, to get separation. You're going to be able to put full effort into mastering, to get the clipping right, to get the limiting right, to get the translation right to other systems, or whatever the case may be. Take this advice and rock with it. I hope I was able to help even one person watching this video. I wish this type of video was out when I started making music. All the mixing courses, everybody is secretive when it comes to the ingredients of success, when it comes to art and music and whatever it is. I think that is so counterintuitive when it comes to art itself, because first of all, you could have all the same ingredients, all the knowledge, same knowledge, whatever it is, but you're not going to come out with the same product, same result as another person. No two people are going to be the same. You might be similar, but everybody's unique. So take that advice. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please, if you want anything in specific, you guys let me know. I'll be happy to demonstrate. I'm trying to come up with more videos, more ideas. I'm going to be posting a lot more in the coming future. So just feel free to let me know in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful night.